All right, so just waiting for a few people to come in. Here we go. Always makes me feel like the kid at the birthday party seeing all the friends arrive. Or does that make me sound real lame that people attending a webinar are friends for a birthday party? But I'll give maybe, a few more seconds to see who else joins us. All right, so I'll welcome you all to the 8th webinar now in this series. So this is the second one in the trilogy of essentially what would you like to know about LT? What can we answer? And so it's going to be a bit more of a opening up to the floor approach, that we do have some questions that people were kind enough to raise while registering. So I'll address those first. And before I do that though, just some housekeeping for the webinar, if you haven't used it before. So there's the chat function, which I can see. Cheers, Stephen. Thanks for joining. And yeah, so if you want to be chatting to other participants, or maybe you've got a particular question about how the webinar works, put that in chat. But if you have a question about LT that you want to ask to me, and others can see that, please use the Q&A function for that. And I'll be answering what questions I can from the Q&A function. And I'll share my screen now and point out some other useful resources, which hopefully you are all familiar with now. The first one being that a lot of what we'll be talking today is available on the support site, and this can be accessed in LT from the drop down here. If you're experiencing any aberrant behavior, or you just want to give particular feedback about LT, you can use the LT feedback option. And then we've also got the LT community, which I'm really passionate about, as some of you know. And that's where you can have discussions, either one-on-one or post threads to other LT users. So just making sure you're aware of all of that. All right, and we'll get cracking into this. So the first question that I want to address is one that was asking, is it possible to set up a multiple answers for an MCQ? And at the moment, MCQs in LT, under the questions panel tab here, you can only set one correct option. So if I was to put in a really great question like that and put in some options, at the moment when you choose an answer, it is only one option. So it's limited in the MCQ panel itself, but there are workarounds to achieve the same result. And as always, it pays to check what content is available already in LT. And here's an example of one way that you can have multiple options for an MCQ. So it's not actually an MCQ, but it's achieving the same effect. And so this is using the categories panel. So this is from the nervous system lesson, or one of the nervous system lessons that ADI has created. And you can achieve the same effect because essentially you could have, say, for example, it doesn't have to be sympathetic or parasympathetic. It could be just simply true or false. And then you can have multiple correct ones for that particular option. And so, with a bit of rejigging, you can turn an MCQ where you want multiple selections into a categories question. And that is easy enough to do. I'll quickly show. So under questions, categories, you can drag it on. And if you haven't used categories before, it's a very simple approach. So you put your question in here. Let's carry on as that. That's a great question. Or maybe what is true or false? Let's actually have something that potentially is answerable. So you could then put true and false. And then you can put all the options that you want along the left here. Now this puts me on, I'm just going to make up random stuff because I don't want to be getting into any contentious what is true or false. And now when you set either graded or instant feedback, you can choose which one's which. So cheers, Sonia. Yeah, A, B, or C are good as well. And also, when you are setting up these, you can be fancy and put in images if you want in the background. That might just prompt students or just make it a bit more visually appealing. And you can have multiple categories as well. Note that if you have 4, they start to come down and stack on top of each other. So if you are using categories, keep in mind how many actual category columns you have, and also the number of options that you have, because the way that LT works is that it will default to each column is going to be as long as the number of categories. So what this means is that if you have many categories, then you can start to have a very long panel, and sometimes students have to scroll down to see it. So just bear that in mind if you are going down this particular approach for adapting MCQs to be multi-select. The other option that you can do to achieve the same effect is table questions. And I really like these because you can combine many questions together into the one question panel. So again, you can put in whatever options you want, some more question up the top, X. And yeah, because you can essentially achieve the same things with categories, but in table format, you can condense it down a bit more, and you can choose what particular cell they answer. So if you have, I'm trying to think on the fly, let's go with, let's go just with numbers and numericals. So, and making sure to lock any cells that you don't want students to answer. Then students can be answering these particular cells, which obviously depends on what context you have. Realizing probably should have come up with one beforehand, but tables can address the same or solve the problem in a similar way to categories. And actually, on that note, so with question tables, you can fast drag from Excel into LT. So if you do have or want to be converting a MCQ into a table question, then if you have Excel open and you've populated or created that table in Excel, you can utilize the fast drag function in LT. So see, I've just got the cells, dragging it over, and really importantly, making sure to hover over this cog icon, because when you release, that will give you the option to choose what panel type you want that information you're dragging in from outside of LT to be. So in this case, I want it to be a table question. Really importantly, it needs to be a question panel if you want students to actually enter any data. If you choose simple table or simple spreadsheet, the students will only be able to view the data and not actually edit. So in this case, I'm going to insert the table, and you can see now that we can do all the formatting as needed. So keep that in mind. And looking across, see that we've actually got a new question. So hopefully everyone can see that. Quickly read through it on the fly. It's a bit of a long one, sorry. Some questions. So language teachers, we only have manually graded through the platform in the past, as it does not support part manual, part automatic grading, and we have needed to manually grade speaking and writing skills. How does automatic grading work if we were to have some lessons as fully automatic? So essentially, looking at the grading aspect of LT, which is something that has recently been updated, which is great timing for this question. And then also the other aspect of that question was, accessing analytics metrics, individual scores. So I might answer that now and jump ahead to something I was going to show later in the webinar, but now that we're on the topic, I'll show it now. So that's the grading aspect of LT. And here's a pre-populated instance, and just a reminder in terms of how to get to the grading aspect of LT. It's under the student work card. And then you'll see all the lessons that are available to students. So in this case, just the one. And when you select that, you can see there's the grading option. And this gives you an overview of the progress of the students. And if need be, you can go into student progress and get the emails of those that maybe are still in progress and need a very polite hurry up. And once you're ready to grade, you can select the grade lesson option, and it will take you into the grading environment. So if you have previously been using LT to do manual grading via downloading PDFs or having students send PDFs to you via email and grading that way, this hopefully will make life a lot easier because you can do a lot of grading directly in LT, and actually LT will do a lot of grading for you. So if we close those down, so for those that aren't familiar with grading, the light and bolts here indicating questions that are automatically graded by LT. So those are MCQs, and actually that's a good point coming back to what we were talking about before. If you're wanting to have a multi-select MCQ option and using either categories or table questions to achieve the same result, that categories questions can be automatically graded or are automatically graded, but table questions aren't. So if that is something that is a factor when you're looking to create multi-select MCQ equivalents, then I would be recommending categories questions over table questions if you're wanting automatic grading. If you don't want to see what questions are automatically graded, you can toggle those off. And if you forgot when authoring a lesson to assign or make that question a graded question, there is this option to toggle on those questions that were non-assessed. There's only going to be one, and it'll appear along here. So you can see that when I toggle that on, I can see those questions, or this question that was not originally graded. And in terms of grading, so I think about half an hour ago, the team just released a cool new update, and they've actually been releasing a lot of updates to the grading interface, and that's already been covered in some of the webinars, but I'll run through it again in case you've missed it. So the first one is that you can view the model answers for this particular lesson. So this is really useful if you're wanting to get the context for that lesson, because if you were to say look at this particular question, delving into it, you can see the question and you can see the model answers and grading instructions, but potentially there might be some context that you're missing, particularly if you didn't author this question and you've just been thrown in the deep end having to grade. So now the ability to view model answers allows graders to view the lesson, go to wherever that question was, and then they can see what the context was that that question was being asked in, and that just will help hopefully with the grading. So that's first improvement. And another one is there's this column here on the left which has all the students listed, and this means that you can be working with the same question for all students rather than before where you could only go through one student at a time or having to go back out to the table view and back in. So now you can quickly be going down the list of students for that particular question, which is usually the preferable way to grade. And what's changed in the last half hour is that there's grading progress now. So you can see there's two areas for that. There's this grading progress up the top right here. And so that's all students, 80% have been assigned a grade. And you can then see for individual students how you're going as well. So some are getting close to being fully graded, some are fully graded as indicated by this 100% complete tick here. And you can also make sure to toggle down by sections to see just that particular group of students that you might have been assigned to grade. And also another thing is if you need to order the student list. So you can do a given name or family name. And importantly, search as well. So if you've got hundreds of students, you can be searching if need be, if you just want to reference that particular student and not have to scroll down through here. So yeah, a lot of cool new changes for grading. Looking forward to hearing feedback about that. And it looks like that question was answered, so I'm glad. Just a reminder again, if you do have any questions, just to put them on the Q&A function in Zoom, and I'll address it. So I'll call that one done, and pause here just to see if anyone's maybe frantically typing away on a question. And it doesn't have to be a specific question. If there's maybe a particular area of LT you've not explored, or you've still not quite got your head around and you'd like me to talk to, by all means, throw that up on the Q&A and I'll address that. So I'll stop rambling at you for a couple of seconds and see what comes up. All right, I'm going to assume that everyone's now an ace on LT, no other questions, and that you are procrastinating maybe from grant writing to join this webinar. But I'll run through some other areas of LT that sometimes can lead to confusion or be sticking points. And the first one address is that of lessons and modules and publishing and availability. Because sometimes, maybe just the terminology that's used in LT might differ to what you're used to. And so just to clarify that there are lessons and then there are modules, and a module is just a group of lessons. And so you can see the two options here as an author, and you can see that under modules it will tell you what lessons are in those modules. So if you click on it, you can see what lessons make up that module. And something that I've noticed when I've been working with users is often what we call a thumbnail can be missing. So in this case, you can see that this lesson is lacking a thumbnail, and that can really stick out. So if you're a bit of a perfectionist like me and want to have everything lovely and pretty, having a big grey box displayed to students is not the best. So to change that for a module, there's this details option here. So if you click that, you'll see the ability to edit the details, and so you can change the image or apply an image. So something that is quite minor, but can really make it nice for students. All right, so just popping across to see I've got a new question, so I'll address that one now. Can you explain the difference between tables and spreadsheets, table questions and spreadsheet questions? Sure thing. So if I pop into a lesson, all right, edit that just to highlight the difference. So under panels with basics, you've got your table and spreadsheet questions. So these are uneditable by students. So students can only view them, but they can't edit them. So if I drag one on and put a bit of data in, just as something to look at, and I'll do the same for a spreadsheet. And again, throw in some random data. So we can see that, and maybe I'll get fancy and actually label all this. And so for the basic table and basic spreadsheets, when students are viewing these, they can't edit these or add their own values. So they're purely for just passive consumption of information, so to say. And if you're wanting students to input their own data, this is where you'll need to use table question and spreadsheet question. So if I drag one of those on, maybe put in a divider, and what the heck we'll put in. Cool. So the difference now is that when a student is encountering a question table or a question spreadsheet, they can actually input data. So obviously really good if you're maybe doing analysis or having students do analysis, and we need them to actually put in data. And you need to make sure that the question panel or the panel is a question panel. Some other things to note with this as well is that if you want the students to have a bit more functionality with table questions, is by default they'll be simple, but if you deselect the simple option down here, it now brings up these options. So if I pull that up there, you can see that now as a student, so previewing here, they can input data as usual, but if they want to subscripts, superscripts, and importantly add their own rows and columns, because if they're not sure how much data they're actually putting in, then that's an option for them to do. And if they want, they can color code. And for spreadsheets, same deal. They can be inserting rows. Generally, what you'll notice in the ADI content is that spreadsheets, or the use of spreadsheet questions is quite limited. Generally, they're table questions, because often the range of values that are being inputted is quite small, and so generally there'll only be a few cells put in. Spreadsheets obviously really good if you've got a lot of data put in and spread across a large range. But generally speaking, table questions are the nicer option to use. And just highlighting again that if you already have existing tables that say in Excel, you can be dragging those in, and just highlighting again, you need to hover over the cog and then release in order to bring the table question option up. And if you're bringing in formulas, you need to make sure that in Excel, the show formulas option is selected. Otherwise, it'll just bring in the value, not the actual formula. So if I do that again, we can see that there's the formula now displayed here. And so students can't edit that. But if students want to put in their own formulas, they can be doing that as well. So they could be doing C2 plus D2. Cool. And actually on that note, this is delving into quite advanced stuff, but you can also, as an author, reference other tables when you're creating content. So say, for example, let's just duplicate that. If you wanted to reference this table up here, you can figure out firstly what that table question is. So in this case, it's table 6. And then you can say table 6, exclamation mark, let's go with C2. And hopefully I've done that right. Yep. And so now it's referencing C2 of this table, which can be really useful if you're delving into quite in-depth analytics, or say, for example, you're wanting, if you're working with physiology and you're, say, needing volunteers information to start compiling a detailed list, generally around respiration. Often you're needing quite a few variables. You can be pulling in a lot of different variables from different tables in order to collate a nice succinct table. So that's a bit more of an advanced feature, but it can open up a whole new world of opportunities. And so that's hopefully answered the question of difference between tables and spreadsheets, and between basic and question styles of those as well. All right, so no other questions coming around that. All right, so I'll jump back to the other area that can sometimes lead to confusion, and again related to lessons and modules, is the publishing and availability of those, because it's possible to change or to publish a lesson by itself and also publish a lesson in a module, and students can attempt both of those, which can obviously lead to confusion for the students. That some have started one, some have started the other. So to try and nip that confusion in the bud, so to say, I'll reiterate here what the difference is. So as we're looking at the moment, you can see you've got the lessons card open, you can see all the lessons. And what's really nice is that for any lesson, and this is a relatively new feature, any lesson that is in a module, when you select it, you can see what modules that lesson is in. So that can clarify things quite nicely. And if you select that, you'll be taken straight to that module. So going through the publishing workflow, if you only want to publish a lesson individually, it's as simple as going to that lesson and selecting publish, and we'll just make that available now rather than choosing a time down the track. There's been other webinars covering availability, so if we'll make that available now, we'll be immediately taken to the student work where we can see that students can now see that, and we can double check that looking at the student view. So we can see that the lesson's sitting out by itself, but if you're wanting to have that lesson in a module, you have to create the module first and then add that lesson. So I might do that now. Create a new module, and we'll edit it and add that lesson. So and then finish editing, and then again the option to publish is at the top right here. So I think sometimes where the confusion can lie is that when you're looking at lessons, working with those, authoring them, that you can see the publish option and do that, but just clarifying or reiterating that we'll publish the lesson individually. So before publishing anything, just take the moment to consider, is this something that needs to be in a module, or is it something that's best published as a standalone lesson? Generally, I recommend modules. They're a bit tidier, and as soon as you publish a lesson individually, there's currently no way to bring that back into a module without removing all the students' answers, and that's quite an extreme example. So same deal when you do go to publish a module, select publish, and you can make it available now, and we'll see again what I was talking about, where if you haven't assigned a thumbnail, it looks really ugly. Obviously, if students are looking at it in list view, then that's not too much of a major. So that's a very brief overview of publishing and availability, or mainly publishing and lessons and modules. Cool. So that is probably where I'll leave it now, unless there's any other questions that people want to ask. More than happy to delve into a particular area that you've not explored or want some more insight into. It's always very strange asking that and not seeing people's responses, but I'm assuming everyone's hunky-dory and wanting to get back to that grant writing or creating lessons in LT. So I'll probably leave it there, and thank you for taking the time. And don't forget that there is another webinar like this next week in the UK Europe time zone. And you can ask questions beforehand for that as well. And if you want to attend live, you can, but it's always these webinars are recorded, so you can be watching that later on, or you might be doing that already for those of you in the future. So once again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your days. See you guys.